I'm here.
Hello.
Oh my God. Talk about a comedy of errors.
And usually we message each other like the day before or something like, are you still on for tomorrow? Or
Right,
how
right,
does it
right.
work?
Oh
And
my
then 10
gosh.
minutes before we're meant to go and we're like, how do we actually do it on YouTube?
Well, we know from next time. Next
We
time.
do.
And
And we
and
do.
honestly, StreamYard is super easy, so we can get it to work and then next time we
Okay.
can do it. All right, so
Yeah,
we're here now, and to
we
everyone
are.
who has come on over from YouTube for us, thank you so much. And Twitter.
Yeah. How how awkward. But anyway, the point is for us to speak and the point is for us to get that dialogue going. So
Yes.
we'll save it. I can send it to you. You can send to your followers as well.
Okay,
Um,
great.
so yeah, here we are. How are
Here
you?
we are.
How's life?
Life is good. I was just thinking before we came on about an article I recently read about Smith College. You probably have seen what's going on with Jody Shaw. There's an employee of a college in New England,
Hmm.
and she recently quit in protest because of all the abuse that she was taking over, the staff at the college were taking abuse from students and from administrators being forced through critical race theory training. And it was sparked apparently a couple of years ago by a student who accused a janitor and a campus security guard of racism because she said they just, you know, they questioned her just because she was black, and it turned out
Right.
she was in a building she wasn't supposed to be in, etc. But they, of course, the college right away took her word for it, and you know, uh, there were death threats, all kinds of things for the janitor. It was terrible. But anyway, long story short, I was reading a New York Times piece talking about how it's, these typically liberal spaces are now so illiberal, and I had to shake my head. I mean, it's terrible. Don't get me wrong. But
Hmm.
my whole life, from 15 years of age, and the first time I was politically or aware of anything,
Hmm.
um, it hasn't been safe to not be a Democrat in America. I don't know
Yeah.
how it is in the UK, but it was not safe to question the orthodoxy of, you know, we must support the state, we must support government programs, all these. So I'm now seeing people saying, it's all new. Oh, it's so illiberal. And I'm like, welcome to my world.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's been like this forever. The only difference now is it's so much more aggressive and so much less logical, and you don't even have the protections anymore of the court because lawyers won't represent you, etc. So it's just
Hmm.
gotten to include so many more people. Again, I don't know how it is in the UK, but
It's exactly the same. And I was speaking to a friend and I was saying our problem, let's say the conservative kind of, whether you're politically or socially, we don't mind how people are, we don't mind what people do, and we don't mind what people think. But I feel like what's going on nowadays in society is not just we want you to accept and respect what we think. It's now we want you to love and like and think like how we think. And I think that's the difference between nowadays and before. So all these things that are coming up about, racial identity issues and the gay rights, and they've always been in existence. I understand that there's been spaces that perhaps some people have not been allowed to overtly enter in, but that's changed. We're talking 2021, especially in the UK and the US. I can't speak for other countries, let's say in the Middle East, in some places in Africa, some other places in the world. I can't speak for those places, but what I can say is that the UK and the US have come a long way in terms of being accepted, different religions, different cultures, different races. But now it's like, no, that's not enough. We've not come a long way. I don't know if you saw one of my recent videos. Actually, Black people have not made any progress in this country.
oh my gosh.
Literally, we've made no progress in this country. So therefore, we want A, B, C, D, E to feel like we belong in society and things like this. So it doesn't really make sense when you look at the details of what these people are pushing for that they
Yeah,
already have, you know?
exactly. Exactly. And I don't think most of the things I see nowadays, I don't think are sincere. I don't think people really want what they're asking for precisely that reason. It's like you already have it. So I don't think that's what you're asking for. It's almost like you're pretending it's raining and it's sunny. And I'm looking around and going, but it's sunny. And like, no, it's raining. And the weird part is, there's an old story, you've probably heard it, Hans Christian Andersen's story about the emperor's new clothes, about an emperor who is so vain, he's so proud that he's actually easy to con. And these con artists come to him and they say, we have the most beautiful suit of clothes for you, but it's unique in all the world. It's so fine. It's so rare. It's so beautiful that only, it's only for you. We've made it especially for you. And they go into a trunk and they take out nothing. But he doesn't want to be a fool and say, I don't see it, because they're telling him how amazing it is. So he says, oh, it's so beautiful, I must have it. So, of course, he's parading down the street naked, and everyone in the kingdom is afraid to tell the emperor he's naked. So they're all cheering, and there's a little boy on the side of the street going, but he's naked.
Yeah.
He's completely butt naked. Does not everyone notice? And I feel like people like us are the ones going, but he's naked.
It's there,
And so what's happening? And so,
but just the analogy of what you said is like they're saying it's raining when it's sunny. I can understand that in a way. What I'm going to explain is as follows. It's been raining, and maybe that rain has caused a lot of damage, a lot of fear in them. Maybe it flooded their houses. Maybe they had near death experience and things like that. And that has almost traumatized them, that even though it's sunny, they're so paranoid, but it's going to rain again. It's going to rain again, and I'm going to be back in that situation. And that's how I feel it sometimes is with, let's say, people who feel, or who used to feel, or their group, which is more important, because maybe they themselves have never felt that exclusion, but there's a narrative that's been driven that their group is excluded. So they feel, well, this is what has happened to us so and so years ago. So now it's all great, but it can happen again if we let our guard down and we say that we're free and included. Let's keep saying it's raining, and then we can always be prepared for that rain, even though it's sunny. Does that make sense?
It does. And the only part that doesn't make sense to me, because, for two reasons. One, I'm not a believer in sort of a collective consciousness. I don't think that exists. I think you can live in an isolated or like an insulated community or world where you don't have enough exposure to the outside world that that your perception is not real. Okay. So because you haven't set foot outside of it, if somebody tells you, oh, they hate us out there, they don't like us out there, bad things will happen, or you see the bad things that are happening, it's because of these people from out there. It's the us them mentality. So if you are stuck in this place, let's take as an example in the United States, the south side of Chicago. I had a guest on last week, Quincy Bingham, and he was talking about how he,
a bit of it. I still need to finish it. Good show.
So he came up from the South. He came up from Jackson, Mississippi, and going to Chicago was very different, because poverty in the South is very different from poverty in the city. And so he asked some of his friends, he said, hey, let's go to the south side of Chicago. And they said, you're going to have a bad day if you do that. That's not a good thing to do, right? And he realized through a couple of other interactions going to visit there that there were people there who had not really set foot outside of that neighborhood. They either didn't have occasion to do it, or they didn't have the money to do it. There was no destination for them to go to. So they just kind of were there. And as a consequence, whatever stories you are told there, you tend to believe. It's almost like you're living in an isolated little world. So I think that becomes your consciousness. And it is that much easier for people to tell you, if you set foot across this line, these bad things will happen. And this is why. And you don't have any point of reference to tell you that that's not true. And so then when people like me say, I mean you no harm, I have nothing, I don't believe these things, that what you're being told that I think, or people who look like me think, is simply not true. They either don't believe you, because why should they believe you when they have their mother, their grandparents, their uncles, their aunts, their friends, everybody in their community? Why should they believe me? They probably shouldn't, right? Then, of course, you have the news media. All you have to do is turn on what's on standard cable, which is probably what most people do, CNN, and
Mm-hmm.
then it's in their public school classroom. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the narrative. It's just repeating what they've already been told. So you're getting like one very narrow, almost like fisheye view of the world. And there's not really a way to break through that unless you actively engage. I mean, I've been very hopeful with the internet and YouTube and Instagram and so forth, and voices like yours speaking out, because people are more likely to listen to someone. I hate to say it, but it's true. If somebody looks like you, and then the thing that's been so disturbing is the way that woke ideology has even impugned members of the Black community and said, well, if you don't think the way the narrative says you should think, don't listen to that person now.
Mm-hmm.
Now that
Mm-hmm.
person doesn't count. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like, oh my gosh, well, there goes the hope that I had, because I have no hope to break through.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're even going to look at somebody who looks like you, who maybe comes from a similar community that you come from, or whatever, and find the things that are different as opposed to the things that are the same, I don't know how we break through that. The only thing I can think of is that we take a different tack, which is, instead of trying to go against the people who are already deciding, I'm not going to listen, I've got my 10 reasons why I'm not going to listen, you just keep, finding like-minded people to create sort of a critical mass and make platforms or fill up platforms that are an alternative to the CNNs and the, BBCs and so forth, so that suddenly the kind of like the tide of attention gets drawn to another platform, and the
Mm-hmm.
message is so conflicting, that people start to question. And somebody
Yeah.
has a question here.
Yeah, I will take it, and then I just don't want to forget a point that you mentioned that I want to make very clear. So yeah, it's not really a question. They just said think as an individual rather than your group identity, and that's great.
Right.
And someone also asked how to save a Black person who has been brainwashed, and that ties in with what you mentioned. So you said, and I want to make it quite clear to even people who are listening, when someone, let's say, let me focus on a Black person who has a certain oppressive mindset, which I'm not necessarily saying is wrong. It's maybe all they've known. It's maybe what they've seen. So we can't say it's all in their head, because it definitely isn't. I've faced experiences as well that could have led me a certain way, but it didn't, because of my upbringing, which I'll come into, and my own personal build up. I don't know, everyone is built differently, I guess. It doesn't mean anyone is better than anyone, but there
Right.
I do have a certain natural, like, I'm not gonna just take what he says gospel. I want to live it myself.
Yeah.
Just a small example. I'm the kind of person that if you tell me, like, let's say I start a new workplace, and the usual, oh, be careful of that person, or I'm automatically, actually, I want to get to know that person, because I want to prove you wrong, that actually I'm stubborn like that. I like to do what people try to say I can't do or can't be. That's just me. So that's one thing. Now, you mentioned that it's more likely, let's say, for someone in that mindset to listen and relate to someone, let's say, like a Black person. And I'm telling you from experience, it's not true. Someone who is, let's say, has a Black person who has a certain kind of mindset, I am exactly the same as you, a threat. Someone that is trying to threaten that, I don't want to say legacy, because that is not the right word, but that kind of pattern that has kept them almost safe. It is a
Mm-hmm.
safety. It's like humans are natural survivalists. We see what may potentially harm us or make us extinct somehow or whatever, and we try to build things, whether it's destructive or not, to try and save us from that perceived harm. So I see many of these mentalities as a way for them to stay in a certain place, not branch out. Let's say they hear it's difficult to get a job, right? That's one of the narratives. It's difficult to get a job because of your name. It's difficult to get a job because of your hair. It's difficult to get a job because of your nose, because of your lips. They're hearing all of this, right? So to almost shield them, that collective group, from branching out, stepping out into the world, taking risks, they don't. They stay. Actually, Why don't you have a job? Well, it's really difficult. But like I always say, you have two choices. And each of those choices are going to be, let's say, difficult or scary. You either stay where you are and stay stuck, stay behind, or you branch out. Look at the way I'm talking, like getting a job is scary, or even if you have to face people that don't like you because of your name or whatever. These are normal things that anyone has to do. But human beings, we build up these excuses of why we don't do what we need to do in life. I don't
Right.
know if this is sensitive for anyone, but even women who've been abused, or even men who've been abusers when they were children and things like that, they grow up with these kind of, I can't have a happy relationship because of what I went through, or I can't relate and deal with people because of what I went through. Is a way to protect them from being hurt again. But the difference I see with some Black people, like I mentioned before, is that they have never actually experienced discrimination in the sense of what the narrative is saying.
Right.
So not being able, most of them, as we've seen, are highly paid, successful people. I remember last year, one of the few men I spoke to, a Black man, he was a millionaire living in the center of London on a fancy boat. He had a boat, and then he lived in a penthouse in this beautiful area of London. And I bumped into him and we just got chatting. And one of the first things he said was, because I was outside my workplace and I was a supervisor at the time. And he said to me, well, be careful that these white people don't treat you as nothing. And I'm thinking, but number one, you're just telling me about all these crazy parties you have for celebrities. Like, why are you preaching to me about being oppressed and being like excluded, or the white man taking advantage of me? And number two, I am actually in a position where I am supervising this team of white people. So why is there this automatic, because they see me and I'm Black, then I must be somehow, underneath or under white people? It's just crazy to me.
The
So,
part I never understood is, and I still don't understand, is why more Black people are not deeply offended. So, for example, we hear about how you're supposed to be offended if someone does cultural appropriation, or if a Black cartoon character is voiced by a white actor or actress or something like that, that people find that offensive. And then I think to myself, why don't you find it offensive that someone assumes you're offended? In other words, why would you not be offended that people, especially white people, are walking around assuming your skin is paper thin, assuming that you're obsessed with your own, with anything that you don't have, as opposed to looking at your strengths? Why aren't more people saying, back off, I'm not this fragile little piece of, snowflake that you think I am. I'm not an infant, I'm not a child, I'm not weak, I'm not, because here's how I look at it: is, let's say it was all true. Let's say it was all true, that people were still like 1960s level, deep down in their hearts, racist. Okay,
mhm.
if the law is the law, and as long as the law, and I know there's some people say, well, it's not really enforced. Okay, we'll leave that to the side. But for the most part, okay, if you're not seeing people literally being, like in the 60s in the United States, kicked out of places. So what people feel in their heart, you're still free. Like, in other words, even if I walk around and I feel like I'm in a place where everybody hates me, but they can't do anything, like it doesn't do anything. It doesn't stop me. They don't get in my way. Or even if they tried, I still had means to go around them. My thinking is such that I would be like, it's not really who's going to let me do something. It's going to be who's going to stop me, because I'm going to go around you. I don't care if you like me. I don't care if you judge me. I don't care if you're anti-Semitic, because that would be my situation. Go for it. I think you're a fool and you're missing out on knowing me, but whatever. I've got places to go and people to see, and I don't need to be bothered with you. So unless somebody's literally standing block in my way, I kind of don't care what they think of me. So if somebody were to come to me and say, "Oh, you poor little person, aren't you upset?" I'd be like, "Ew."
It's more embarrassing. It's more insulting, but this is what I'm saying. It's almost the individual build-up of each person. Some people love that attention, whereas
Right.
me, I
I would
see my
hate it. Ugh.
because I truly see myself as equal to, let's say, a white person.
Right.
If people don't do that to you, don't do that to me. You understand? So that's
Right.
the difference. I remember when I went on holiday to Germany and all my friends are like, oh my gosh, they're so
Right.
racist there. They hate black people. They seem to love me. I was like in my teens, I was getting so much attention, from the German guys. And it's little experiences like that that make me think, but if they're racist, and I'm not light skinned, I'm black, the dark, the ones that are meant to be, disregarded and things like that. And you have such a homogeneous country like Germany, and it was so much fun because of that. And I
I
just
always
think,
find that so funny because when my daughters were little, my middle daughter in particular, always wanted the black doll. Like always wanted the black doll. And she always said, she goes, Mama, her skin is so much prettier. And I want that beautiful brown skin. So I think this notion that people, even the children, oh, they wanted to
mhm,
look like them, whatever. It's like, you don't spend a lot of time with kids, do you? Like really listen to them. The
mhm,
things they think the same things are beautiful that we think are beautiful. And people don't look at someone and decide beauty based on these bizarre, arbitrary social constructs. They look
exactly.
at something that's objectively beautiful, it's objectively beautiful. So I always think when people go light skin, dark skin, I'm like, I don't know personally. Like I think a person is beautiful or they're not beautiful, period. It's like irrespective of that. But that's a
I
side
completely
thing.
agree. So
And
someone asked here,
yeah,
maybe you're the best person, or I can chip in as well, how to refuse white guilt. Well, it says white guilt acceptance, but I'm gonna ask you about white guilt.
well, it
And
really depends on if
you,
they're directing
have
it
you ever
as,
felt that
have I
as
ever
well?
felt white guilt?
Mm-hmm.
No, because I just philosophically, see, this goes to my philosophy. I do not believe in collective guilt. I believe in the individual. So it's the same as I would no more look at a black person and say that because some people who happen to be black did something in a place or hurt anybody, whatever, that I am now, holding black people accountable. It's like, I think that is a form of evil. Like if you begin to say that someone has some kind of original sin or some kind of intrinsic guilt for something they did not literally perpetrate. Now, I understand that today people say, but white guilt is attached to the benefits you derive from the things that people perpetrated in the past. And my
Mm-hmm.
point of view there is, first of all, I go back to my philosophy. I still think, no, I still think you have to look at the individual person. And secondarily to that, I think you're really stretching if you don't know individual circumstances to take someone purely on their DNA, the color of their skin, and of all the things that could have happened, it becomes ridiculous. Now, if we were talking one generation out and my grandparents owned slaves, we might have an argument. That might be a valid argument, okay? Because I would have literally benefited in terms of my financial position. But if you look at me, where I have, great grandparents, Eastern European Jews fleeing certain death from the Cossacks, okay? It's very difficult for me to take that seriously or take that on because that's not attached to the color of my skin. That is just, I just happen to look like other people who did bad things 200 years ago. So it
Good point.
becomes, from a philosophical standpoint, it becomes absolutely patently absurd and illogical. And so I reject it out of hand. Unless you can tell me that someone has literally perpetrated an offense against you or your community. Like I think politicians are more should be held more to collective account because they have
Mm-hmm.
literally held power in recent
Mm-hmm.
history. But if you start going back before people are born, I think you're getting into very dangerous territory where if you make that okay from a philosophical standpoint today for white people and the pendulum swings back the other way, you are inviting a backlash in the other direction that would be extremely terrifying. So what I do in my mind is I always say, am I comfortable with this idea if I turned it 180 degrees around? Do I still think it's a valid idea? If it's against another person, if it's against somebody, and when the answer is so obviously no, then it's a terrible, terrible idea. You can't
Exactly.
assume that because you're currently, it's like, oh, I'm in the top seat now. or my people or the things that I agree with are here, that it's always going to be the case. It really has to come down to core principles. And my core principles are: we don't have collective guilt in a free society. We have innocent until proven guilty. You must bring forth evidence that I've hurt you, and then we'll talk. But no, holding people to DNA account, I think, is so regressive and backwards and anti every bit of progress. People call themselves progressives and then say, this goes back to like tribal level, we're going to bury you up to your neck and stone you because your family did something. I mean, that's just not okay. Philosophically, to me, that's the same idea.
It's exactly the same. So let me just get a question. So do you get offended if a non-white person asks to touch your hair? I guess that's for me. So
If a
no,
non-white person
if a
touches your hair,
non-white person, so is that for you?
is it for me?
Oh yeah, actually, that's a good point, because black girls, black women, we get offended, or they get really offended, and there's articles about this. I think there's even books about our hair. Our hair is such a thing, and I will touch on why why that is understandable as well, and why that shouldn't be always dismissed as, "Oh, it's just hair." I will touch on that. But how do you feel when people, like someone who's not white or even white, how do you feel if they touch your hair? Is it a
Well, it's
thing?
actually never happened to me, but it has happened to my daughter. My daughter went to a very diverse middle school when she was in public school, and she has very long, thick, extremely curly hair. And so it would happen very frequently that black girls would go and be constantly fingers in her hair and playing with her hair and touching her hair. And the only reason it bothered her is she's a very introverted person, kind of like it doesn't seem like I am, but I'm not a big touchy-feely person. So she said she wouldn't have mind if they asked. So it was kind of like it had more to do with politeness and personal boundaries than feeling racially offended. I think she even would have felt flattered, you know what I mean? Because people would make comments like, "Oh, your hair's so curly and I like it's whatever." So there's a
Hmm.
flattery component. I think I would be flattered, but I would be maybe nervous only because I don't like people to come into my personal space. When I was pregnant, people were constantly touching my stomach, and the only reason it bothered me was, why do you think you can touch me? Period.
Okay.
Like,
Yes.
I mean, I don't know you and you're touching me.
Hmm.
But as far as racially offended, no, not in the least. I would be flattered if someone said your hair is so soft or it's so shiny or it's so this or that. I would say thank you, because to me, most of these things are, I really do believe, sincerely a form of flattery.
Hmm.
I think people find differences unique and interesting and attractive. And if we treat them as such, even if it isn't meant that way, I think it can become that way.
Yes, exactly.
So I think a lot of what we perceive in the world is how we react to it, and what we put out there is kind of like what we get back.
Exactly.
And you've shown that with your photographs. I've noticed when you did your series of photographs, so like, what energy am I putting out? What message am I putting out? What message am I putting out here? And believe it or
Hmm.
not, that goes across races. That's not specific to black people. I mean, even in white community, Hispanic community, any community, if
Hmm.
you take pains to stay away,
Yes.
I'm tough,
Yes.
people will see you that way. It doesn't matter what the color of your skin is. So
Exactly.
I think people interpret things as racial that are really more to do with fashion, class, socioeconomic status, past experiences. Bias is real. We all do. But chances are very high that it has more to do with some past experience that we've had, or something to do with like a culture, like cultural differences rather
Yes.
than racial
Of
differences.
course. Of
So
course.
I think we interpret it to be racial or even hatred or animus, as opposed to nervousness, anxiety, memory, whatever.
The thing is, there is a lot more insecurity generally in society today compared to before. We can say it's the rise of social media. We can say it's the rise of, let's say, celebrities, that kind of lifestyle. And for me, there is genuine offense out there. There is genuine times that people are intentionally offensive.
For sure.
But the majority of the times, and for me personally, 99% of the time, people are offended about things they already insecure about. And I'm saying that because I lived it. I lived it. Before, I don't want you to talk about my skin color. I don't want you to talk about my hair. I don't want you to talk about my facial features because I was embarrassed. I used to get bullied at school. I used to get bullied and have comments from Black people saying I was too dark. My brother is on this live. And I'm going to embarrass him as well. Me and my brothers, my three brothers, when we came from Africa to UK, we used to get called names. Blick. Blick means really dark. Those who are from London and England will know it means like really dark. They would say our faces were shiny, you know, we put Vaseline on our faces. We would get comments from, I know, weird things. We would get comments from white people as well, from everyone, really. And so that built up an insecurity about in me. So I don't want you touching my hair. I don't want you talking about, oh, your skin is beautiful. I took offense with every word because I was already unhappy about that part of me. But now you can touch my hair. I work hard on this hair. I know it's not looking too good, but I do. I take care of my skin. I take care of myself. So, and
Right.
I, you can talk about my culture. Before, I used to be embarrassed about my culture, Nigerian culture. I used to get teased a lot, but you can ask me questions. There's no video. Those who followed me for a while, there's no time you see me and I don't talk about me being Nigerian. It's just part of me now. So people are offended because they lack certainty of themselves. That's why it's so easy even to offend them in terms of racism. If I know someone wrote on the chat, what's the point of being unhappy if one person or one small group doesn't like you? There's billions of people in this world. I know my qualities now. I know my own strengths now. I know what I can give, I know what I can add. So because I know that about myself, whatever reason you discriminate me on, whether
Yeah.
it is my skin color, whether it is the fact that I'm African, because even in some Black groups that has been, a talking point. If it is because I'm too tall, too skinny, gained weight, whatever, because it's different reasons, I know who I am. And
Yeah.
that's why I can enter any space. There is no space I cannot enter. So that's the difference. And also, I'm willing to enter those spaces though, because I feel I keep talking about Black people. I can't really speak much about any races, but I feel they're not even willing to enter some spaces that's not the norm for a Black person to enter. Does that make sense? So
I
let's
do.
take,
Hmm.
or even if they enter it, they still need to be a certain way. So I'm sure many people have seen stories I've shared of Black attorneys, Black politicians. They don't move in the way that's meant to be accepted by Black people, and then they get called names. So that puts the younger generation off, thinking, well, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be called a
And
white man's
and
slave. And so they don't want to be in that position. So we're killing ourselves. We're saying we want things, but the things we already have, unless you are handling it a certain way, then you shouldn't be there, or you don't represent us anymore. So
do you know
it's
what's
difficult to
do you
know.
know what's so sad to me, especially with this BS about, white supremacy or white culture, calling it white. There's no white culture, first of all. And especially if you're talking about UK, like the English speaking world,
Mm-hmm.
UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, America. Okay. We are now at least 200 years past like first slaves or, Africans coming to these English speaking places.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, it is clear that whatever culture it is we live in has been deeply influenced at every level by a multitude of people, races, creeds, cultures, etc. It's a hodgepodge. So, for example, when the first white people that came to this continent, they were wearing the most plain, boring clothes, all one color. Their hair was under a bonnet, just
Mm-hmm.
terrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was influence of Black people on this continent in our earliest days. Even like the braiding of hair meant to tell messages and stuff, but this began very early. And then there are different fashion things, music, all of this came into the culture and interwove into the culture. You would be hard pressed at this point in 2021 to say that any part of our culture how anybody dresses, how anybody wears their hair. I mean, the things my hair won't do, but that's, you know, but it's
Yeah.
all been influenced by Black people. You can, there's not a, that's why I hate that it's February's Black History Month. I'm like, it should be every day, because
Mm-hmm.
there's not Black people and white people. There's not white culture or Black culture or this or that. There are subcultures that are more, shall we say, like, have been more touched and
Mm-hmm.
so forth. But the whole that we all live in, you can't point to any one part of it and say that it's like, you know, that it's only one race of people influence this. So it kind of bothers me that when somebody says this is a white space or a Black space, or that people, you know, you shouldn't dress like this or talk like this, whatever. I'm like, I hate to tell you this, but our language belongs to everyone at this point because it's been influenced for over 200 years. Our clothing
Exactly.
belongs to everyone at this point for the same reason. So if a man wants to wear a three-piece suit, I have news for you. That same three-piece suit is now more dapper and more cool and better tailored and whatever, because at some point along the way, it was influenced by somebody with a fashion
Exactly.
sense from some other
Mm-hmm.
culture, be it Italian, French, whatever, mishmash, Creole, you name it. Who the heck knows? But whatever fashion you're wearing today is not white fashion. It's
No.
fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And so if somebody is saying, well, I'm not going to wear, you know, my pants down here and my hoodie or whatever like that, which by the way is not also Black fashion. It's just fashion
It's
that was
not.
became
Why
a
is it?
trend.
Mm-hmm.
This belongs to everyone. And
Mm-hmm.
I think what I don't like, they're telling like kids in school in particular, like, you can't, we're not reading the classics, it's white literature, and we're not doing this math, it's white math, and we're not doing the science, it's white. This is hogwash. I mean, first of all, we can have a debate over whether the ancient Greeks were purely white, but that's, you know, it's a whole other conversation. But I
Mm-hmm.
think these are universal truths, universal values, universal ideas that are and should be accessible to every human being on the planet. If you like it, if it works for you, if it advances your life on this earth, this one chance you have, right? Then take it, embrace it, use it. Why would anyone, and this galls me about the white people like Robin DiAngelo, who the hell is she to say that, you know, like, oh, well, this is white culture, and that it's like, oh, so you want to benefit from it, what you
Mm-hmm.
call white culture. You're not going to stop benefit. You're not going to suddenly change how you live,
Mm-hmm.
and you claim there's a benefit to it. Why would you want to send the message out to other people that the same thing you benefited from is not something they should embrace? You should
Mm-hmm.
be going the other way if you really believe that. Otherwise, you are a classic racist. And
Exactly.
I
Which she
come,
is.
which of course she is, but I come
Mm-hmm.
from it from the standpoint of like, this belongs to everyone. And the person who steps up and calls something white culture is your white supremacist. That's your white supremacist. Period. They're also ignorant, like totally blanket ignorant of history, because there is not an aspect of ever, from decorative arts to fashion to music to literature, that has not been touched by all the varieties of people that have immigrated to all
Exactly.
these places. UK, all the English speaking world at this point has seen immigration from the four corners of the world. Good luck
Exactly.
to you parsing which aspect of our, you know, clothing, language, everything belongs to this group. You know,
Exactly.
it's
It's
ridiculous.
true. I'm going to take the question, and I just want to say as well as clothing not being, you know, distinct to one culture and these physical manifestations, also values, beliefs. It's not just one culture.
No.
White people are not the only ones that can oppress. Believe me. If you think that, we will go to Nigeria together after COVID is over, and I'll show you some things. Black people are not the only ones who are able to be, what's the stereotype? Victims or aggressive, or Chinese people are not the only ones who can be intelligent or hardworking. I'm just giving examples.
Right.
Qualities cannot be attributed to one race. It can't be owned by one race, or, you know, this is who they are from the beginning of time. This is how they were, you know, developed. This is how they evolved, if you believed in evolution, you know. So all these things just have to stop. And it's like what you're always saying, the
Mm-hmm.
individual, you know, when that's why intersection, what is it called? Intersectionality.
Yeah.
That's why it's a thing now as well, because they found out, well, actually, there's a few things that can cause a person to be a certain way in their life, not just because they are black or they're white, but now they've confused it even further, right? So if you're black plus a woman plus gay, you know, then
Have to
this is
keep
how
that
your
victim
life will
card.
go.
Can't cash in that victim
Why?
card.
Why can't we have victor cars? Why can't we say, wow, you're a woman, you're gay, and you're a Muslim? That's 3 times an opportunity for you to make a
I,
massive difference in this world. Why
I'm
aren't we
gonna
saying
say
that?
I'm gonna say something
Just,
very unpopular, but it doesn't
I love
sell.
unpopular stuff.
It doesn't sell. Victimology sells.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe that we are in the middle of one of the biggest cons by the biggest grifters who have ever existed. That's not to say that there aren't real true believers in all this garbage, and that's sad. But I mean, because there
Yes.
are. But I
Yes.
really believe the people like Robin DiAngelo, Ibram X. Kendi, et cetera, I believe these people are grifters first class. They know exactly how to cater to the most base instincts in people, to which are, fear, envy, greed. Okay? When you can tap into those, you can
Wow.
sell almost any idea more
Mm-hmm.
easily than or heroic ideas. And to
Mm-hmm.
try to appeal to the best in a person is very challenging. It's
Mm-hmm.
much easier, especially
Yeah.
in a time of a pandemic and every other
Yeah.
thing. Super easy.
Wow. It's so powerful what you said. Like, yeah, I'm gonna take the question because otherwise people are gonna be wondering. So, how do you what are both of your opinions on Joe Biden and the Democratic movement in America?
I personally think Joe Biden is impaired. I think he was elected as a kind of a figurehead, like, we'll get him elected. He seems sort of innocuous, whatever, but I
Yeah.
don't think he's actually making the decisions and running the country. I think I sincerely believe he's impaired. I'm not trying to be rude.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if it's Susan Rice or Kamala Harris or a bunch of other people behind the scenes, but there are other people making these policies in the Democratic Party. I'm 100% opposed to literally every policy on the table right now. I feel like they are growing the state, they are creating division, they are benefiting themselves. They've just passed a bill where they're basically giving extra leave money to people who work for the federal government and not to people who've been struggling, especially small business. So
Wow.
I'm not one of those conspiracy theorists typically, but I look around and I say there's a lot of credibility now to this great reset idea, because a lot of the other things that they're doing don't really make sense in any other context. I mean, you could look at them as just a cash grab, just like we're going to clean up and gather all we can, power money wise, and then retire. That's one option. Or you can look at it as a concerted effort on the part of some very powerful people to concentrate their power, solidify their power, weaken the whole for some purpose that they believe is correct.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the whole, it's on paper, the Great Reset. I mean, it's not like I'm making it up, but I think that the movement right now to demonize Republicans, to demonize, well, not just Republicans, anyone who isn't a Democrat, anyone
That's
who,
the point. Yes.
you could, there, I
Yeah.
know people personally, myself included, who had, 10 different reasons for voting for Trump other than MAGA. Like they
Mm-hmm.
weren't MAGA people. They just
Mm-hmm.
said, I'm not comfortable with the woke stuff. I'm not comfortable with the size of government. I'm not comfortable with the way that COVID has been handled. I feel like it was a power grab. So they had all kinds of reasons where they were like, very imperfect person, don't really like him, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there's pushing a bill to make all elections by mail-in ballot.
Wow.
They want to federalize all of the election rules for national elections, so the states will no longer have, and that's in the Constitution. So they're trying to change big
Wow.
components of the Constitution. And of course, the media is not covering this the way they should. The average American is not well educated in civics and to understand their own government. They're so busy just trying to survive this virus and the after effects of it. And I don't mean the virus itself, but like the economic fallout. They've got kids out of school, so they're freaking out. And so, and this policy with education in particular, I mean, they're breaking the law. You see, we have a law in the United States called the IDEA, and it's for people with disabilities. And children who have they've been ruled by the Supreme Court that children have a constitutional right to their education, in particular if they have a special need. and they can't just get it at home. You know, they can't just sit in front of a computer and they need special services. And so for every
Yeah.
child that's been out of school for a year and not getting their services, the schools doing it are violating federal law. And, you know, at the time when Trump wanted to open the schools and he was called a tyrant and a dictator and all these things, and he didn't do it. I really wish he had, because he had every authority to do it. He didn't do it. And as far as Joe Biden now saying he's not going to do it, that's a violation of federal law. And nobody's holding him accountable, because the only people who really appreciate it are the ones who are parents of children with special needs. So even though I'm not a proponent of public school, and even though I, you know, don't care if the schools reopen from a philosophical standpoint, I feel for these parents and these children, and I'm incensed that they've collected our tax dollars. We've had to keep paying, and the teachers keep getting paid, but they're not delivering the services. So I'm very much opposed to their agenda. I think opening the border wide without changing, see, that's the other thing. The people are coming across the border. I'm 100% pro-immigrant. I want to be very clear. 100%. If we didn't have the welfare state we have, I would be like, open the door. Anybody, you know, welcome.
Yeah.
Okay. I have no xenophobia. My issue is that if you have a very robust welfare state, and where debt is exceeding the size of our economy, and your schools are closed, and you bring in all these people who could potentially be carrying COVID, now we have to check that, and they're getting an education. He was bragging about it. He's like, oh, we're educating them. Like, our schools are closed.
That's the problem.
And then what happens when you then put them into the schools that have been closed all this time, where their staff is down, people have quit, people have pulled out of the schools? What's it going to be? I think it is, you have to shake your head and wonder, do they understand how damaging every single one of their policies is all at once? It's like someone going and taking a sledgehammer to the country and going, hey, let's break it and it will be beautiful. Because there's nothing that I see them doing that is constructive. You don't reconstruct a broken country by printing money, by canceling debt, by having a moratorium on rent that extends on into a year. So landlords, mostly immigrant landlords, are destitute. They're destitute. These are not slumlords. These are little, you know, immigrants who saved up their pennies, bought a 2-family home and rented them downstairs, and somebody's squatting. And there's no means testing at all. They're not saying, you know, can you pay the rent? Okay, you can't, we'll forgive it. You don't have to pay rent. It's just a moratorium on rent. People can well afford it, not paying.
Wow,
and this is evil. It's like, and the media reports it as, you know, there's the people fighting this are selfish and they're Nazis and they're this and that. Like, you're talking about small business owners, you're talking about parents, you're talking about, you know, immigrants, you're talking about the people the Democrats typically represent. And they're going, hi, remember me?
Supposedly.
Exactly. And so all I see is the very, very poor who didn't have anything to begin with, right? And the very, very rich. They love the Democrats. The rest of us, like Joe and Jane average, are like, we're the forgotten millions and hundreds of, I mean, it is unreal what's going on. And I just try to keep focused on what I'm doing and on my kids as best I can, but I can't watch the news. I cannot watch the news. If I try to watch, can't do it. I don't know how it is in the UK, except what little news I see.
It's the same.
I'm scratching my head, because this is the country that beat back the Nazis, right? That, like, with the United States and the Allied powers, just, you know, we will fight them on the fields. We will fight them. And here it's just like, virus.
Yeah.
We must lock ourselves in our homes forever and ever. Yeah. And it's worse than here. You guys are like under lock and key.
We're still on lockdown. June 21st, the Prime Minister's aiming to vaccinate all adults, and then maybe we will come out of lockdown. But I was laughing with my partner, because it's just a game. It's like a movie to me now. When you're awake, that's the word they say, right? When you're awake, it's a movie, because this happened last time. We were coming out of lockdown in Christmas, and then they said, oh, well, actually we can't now because there's a new variant from Nigeria or South Africa, whatever. So there's been no variant since. Everything's been fine. Everyone's been vaccinated. So now we're going to come out of lockdown potentially, and all that's on our news now is there's a new variant from Brazil. And it's like, these variants are so damn clever. Like, they know when we're coming out of lockdown and they just swoop in.
Isn't that interesting?
So it's just a game, you know? It's just a game. And for me, the news is like theater now.
Yeah.
Everything is so scripted now, you know. They know what they're doing. They know so they will show you, let's say, a grandma holding her little child and the grandma's passing away, and then they show that, and they literally have like sad music behind, and like, what the hell am I watching? And then after that they show news about vaccines. Then you think, I need to get that damn vaccine, you know.
Have you seen the movie V for Vendetta?
Not yet. Everyone keeps telling me to watch that.
Oh, it begins with a virus. And I mean,
Oh,
I know it's a little out there. It's a little out there. It takes place in the UK, but I keep thinking between that and, you know, the lives of others, which takes place in East Germany and all these things, I'm just like, I wish people had a better grasp of history. I wish people understood their own, the structure of their own government, and I wish they understood their own power, because the only reason that this is happening is that the majority of people are just letting it happen. They're
yeah,
just kind of letting it happen. It's just thinking
yeah,
like, well, surely these people don't mean to hurt us. Surely they're trying to take care of us. If I could, you know, if I could get one message out to people and say, your government does not care about you. No matter what they say, no, they don't. And think about the reasons you wouldn't go into government. Think about why
mm-hmm,
you wouldn't do it, right? You wouldn't do it because you wouldn't want the responsibility, or you wouldn't want the fame, or you wouldn't want all these things, because you're a normal, decent person who isn't a
mm-hmm,
narcissist, and you're not interested in telling other people how to live their lives.
yep,
So you have to wonder, who are the people who want this power? And maybe I should be extremely skeptical about the things that they're doing. And
exactly,
nowhere do I feel that more powerfully than with the schools, with education. It's such a conflict of interest to have government running the places where we send our children. We hand them off, you know, trusting. And there's this innocent little child, their mind all brand new. And who are the people deciding what they'll learn, how they'll learn it, who will teach it to them? This is the very same people who benefit most from them thinking certain thoughts and behaving certain ways. And why there aren't more parents saying, why would I do that, is beyond me. So
mm-hmm,
I just think it's one thing to have agreed to it at a certain point. It's another thing to continue to do it mindlessly without fighting back when you start to see things like critical race theory in the school. Because back to what we were talking about in the beginning about the mindset, if you accept that there are people who are insecure about certain things and then they become parents, okay?
mm-hmm,
And if you truly want to interrupt generational poverty, and you want to interrupt some of the things that will plague minority communities in a majority white society, or in a majority society that's not Black, for example, and if you really want to get in the way of that, you need to address those insecurities. You do not double down on them. And what critical race theory does to me is it takes what may already be an insecurity in someone's family, in somebody's community, and it just goes, it's like, oh, everything your deepest fears, all true, times
yeah,
10.
even worse,
Yeah,
yeah,
even see if it's worse than you ever imagined. And then you take an impressionable child and you tell them you have no agency. Not only is tomorrow not going to be better, you have no power to make it better. It's just this is unless the all-powerful white people do these
do
10
something,
things. Now, I'm sorry, if somebody had told me as a child, oh, you're Jewish and they hate you out there and there's no hope for you. They're always going to hate you. And the only way that you can hope to ever get ahead in life is if the Christians, if the Gentiles decide to make a place for you. The what
nice.
number one feeling in me wouldn't be like, oh, please. It would be like, I freaking hate you and you need to die. Like, because why
Look
would,
at what we hear. This is what we hear. This is what
yeah,
children hear, you know. And it's like, not only that, but then they show, or you have powerful looking celebrities, because these children see celebrities as
yeah.
superheroes, you know. Look at Idris Elba. He's like a role model
Well,
to
he is
many, and
literally a superhero.
he
So, yeah,
do you know what he said? He's and they're so clever. I'm not a linguistic, but I'm so interested in the wording that people use. I always think, why did they use that word and not that word? And there was
same,
one phrase he said.
same.
He said, I had to beat the system to be where I am today. So you have a young boy, especially the ones that are all about, you know, fighting and, you know, superheroes, that kind of action. Wow, he had to beat the system, and he's such a strong man. I've got no chance. who am I in the face of this big bad system? I can't
And
make it. And
and
then they
instead
settle.
what they don't understand is he's an actor. Any person who makes it to the level that he's made it to, I don't care if you're green with purple polka dots, you've beat the system of how difficult it is to become a top level actor. Okay. So
Exactly.
it's utterly ridiculous. And then to top it off, what no one's talking about, well, except you and maybe Gothics, is I don't know if you follow Gothics, but she
I
talks about,
do.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
we follow each other here.
the concept of Black privilege, dare I say it, that when you have things like white guilt and affirmative action and so forth, and racial quotas and a lot of pressure on studios to hire, diversify, how do people know that it won't be actually a little bit easier for you? Not super easy, but a little bit easier for you than
No,
an
no, no, no.
equally qualified white person
It
because
is
of all of
easier.
these things. And
It is
frankly, I
easier.
wouldn't want that if I were in their, I mean, people say, well, easy for you to say, perhaps. I certainly wouldn't, I wouldn't want as a woman, someone to tell me, oh, we're hiring women, so you have a leg up over a man. I'd be like, ew, I want to know that I got the job because I deserve the job, not because I have parts. Okay. And I feel like the best thing to be telling kids is the opposite. There's nothing about you. There's no difference in your ability provided you apply yourself, etc. And then the only caveat would be, and I think this is true for all children, is don't sell them a pack of lies. Like, don't tell them you can be anything you want to be, because that's not true for any child.
That is
But to
true. I
say,
agree. I
yeah,
agree.
there's nothing intrinsically in your race that is going to prevent you from success. So let's start there. Now, are there potentially obstacles in that it's a very competitive field, or there are people more qualified, or you're starting off socioeconomically, that is a real thing, at a level where the person with money is going to have a leg up because they can get tutors or they can have access to better schools or whatever and so forth, then that is real. But it's different than saying it's personal. To say to somebody, yes, you might have to overcome the fact that you have, just your mom and is a single mom, and so she works really hard and you're kind of stuck in this zip code. But that's why we should fight for school choice. To me, the fight for school choice is a civil rights issue. Any
Hmm.
white person who claims to care about the plight of Black students or the achievement gap or the socioeconomic gap and is not actively fighting for school choice is a liar. Because who are the people? They'll even tell you they're stuck in these neighborhoods. Yes, their school is determined by their zip code. So if you really want to help these students, give their parents the same opportunity you have with your higher income to move to a better zip code, to hire a tutor, to do all these things that are all amount to school choice. Okay.
Hmm.
If you truly care, you will
We
fight
don't have
for,
that here. We
right.
don't
And I
have
don't
that
know
here.
how it is. Yet in the UK, it's probably even worse because it's so regimented. But that is the number one thing. If a parent, and it could be a 22-year-old single mom of a 5-year-old boy, okay, she has every right, just as much right, to choose the school for her child, just because she maybe didn't graduate high school or certainly didn't go to college or whatever the case may be. For people to assume that it's good enough for her to just go, for her son to go to the neighborhood school, is a lie. And for them to assume that she won't know and she won't choose right and is so demeaning. She
Yeah.
may know, especially because she's in the circumstance that she's in. She may be extra eager for her child to get a better education so that her child can succeed. And that's where I come in, as I would love to be able to empower people to make their own way for their own children and tell any system, I don't need to worry about overcoming a system. I'm going to ignore the system. The system is irrelevant to me because I am me and I have myself and my community or my parents or my friends or my little neighborhood and my child, and I'm going to fight for my child, and your system be damned.
Transgenderism, introducing, like, I think individuality in the school curriculum as well, and things like that. So yeah.
I just think the schools are doing too much what I would call parenting and not enough educating. And they need to leave things like, values instruction and getting in, telling identity formation. First of all, what a lot of people don't realize, parents in particular, is that although they know it on an instinctive level, I don't think they have confidence in it. because for so long we've been told there are experts and you need to listen to experts, parenting experts, this expert, that expert. And there's a lot of money to
Yeah,
be made in the whole
exactly.
expertise field
Mm-hmm.
of parenting. And
Mm-hmm.
so instinctively, they know that their child's identity doesn't form until later, not when they're
Mm-hmm.
itty bitties, right? But when the experts tell them, like, oh, your 3-year-old is dressing up like a girl, that means this, or your 3-year-old is very, very boyish. Yes, I think they feel insecure to say that's a load of bunk, and my child is playing dress up. Okay. And especially, nowadays where you are telling people that having something different about themselves, especially something that is way outside the norm, is equivalent to virtue, it becomes a way to get approval. And if you're insecure or you don't know where you quite fit, you might attach to some of these identities. And then to have the school validating that instead of just making sure your kids can read and write and do arithmetic and understand history and all these things, I think they're getting between the parent and the child, and they are literally manipulating them. And
Yeah.
I don't know what they get out of it other than just having an easy to manipulate population.
Yeah, I think without offending anyone, I always sort of say as a joke, and I think I've spoken with you and I've mentioned this as well. For me, this is the biggest issue with the West and with civilized, let's say, societies. There's too much available for you guys. I say you guys, I'm here too. But let me speak as a true Nigerian, let's say I don't live here and I've witnessed, and I always like to witness outside whatever group I'm in. So I'm British, I like to see
Sure.
from the outside, and I see that there's too much available for Americans and British people. There's too many theories, there's too many, options, and that is actually a bad thing. In Nigeria, life is so simple. Many people say, oh, it's impoverished and things like that. But look, I've lived in both places, and I tell you, that's the biggest difference I see. Life is so simple there. You're born, you have a lovely childhood, you run outside, you play. Obviously it's different now, but it's still pretty much similar. School is serious. School is not a joke. School is not playtime. They don't play with school, and teachers teach. They don't sort of impose life, ideas and things like that. They teach what you need to learn to be able to succeed in certain workplaces or wherever you want to get to.
You mean being punctual and getting the right answer in math is not white supremacy?
No, no. No,
I've said that to people. I was like, I said, yeah, I've said to people, your ignorance. I'm waiting for Oprah, who has built schools in Africa, to step up and say, can I just jump in here? Like, there are kids sitting on a dirt floor in Africa going to school worried about getting the right answer in math. This has nothing to do with being white. There's no white
exactly.
math. There's math, and it
There's
works.
maths, exactly, and
That's it.
that's the thing. And the parents raise their children. The government and the school has no say in how your child grows or what your child thinks and what your child believes. So you will never be able to get away with identity politics. And actually, your child is showing signs. Once you start that sentence with a Nigerian, your child is showing signs. They're like, look, thank you. I'll figure it out with my child. There's none of this assessments and
They might
theories.
take it a step farther. They might even go so far as to say, "How about you mind your own business?" Like, and the
Literally.
thing, I know, and I don't. The only thing I could tell you is after reading the book "Dumbing Us Down" that I profiled on my YouTube channel, I know that it goes way back in the United States. I can't speak for the UK, but probably similar mindset, because the efficiency experts, around like the Woodrow Wilson time period, they were obsessed with this. First of all, they were racist. And second of all, they were obsessed with perfecting the individual. And so that obsession,
Mm-hmm.
how ironic, they would be horrified at some of the gender stuff, but the impulse to control, the impulse to see individual human beings as cogs in the big machine called society
Exactly.
is one of those ideas that develops a life of its own, and it becomes a like I'm a solution in search of a problem. In order
Mm-hmm.
to justify my own existence, my own philosophy, my own mindset, my own power, I have to keep finding problems, problems, problems. Well, what happens when you're the richest nation on earth and you've solved the big problems? People are getting fed, the water is reasonably clean, the air is pretty clean. People, even poor people have big screen TVs. Okay, it's like the poor people are fat. And I mean, not to be crass, but you've solved the core problems of society, of survival. So now what does the progressive solution machine do? It creates new problems for itself. And that is where you get into this dystopian, twisted weirdness. There's no limiting principle. And this is why I tell people, like, say what you will about conservatives or say what you will about libertarians or people who are like, I hate to use the right left paradigm
Yeah.
because I don't believe in it, but
Yeah.
people who are not Democrats or
Mm-hmm.
not left wing or whatever. People, it's really a difference between the individual and the state. If you really want to break it down as two visions, the state should solve all the problems, someone else should solve my problems, or I should solve my problems. And the thing about the people who live in the I should solve my problems zone of philosophy, and Thomas Sowell talks about it in his book Conflict of Visions, is that there's a limiting principle. What is your proposal? Does it violate individual liberty? Oh, forget about it. I don't care what the intentions are. I don't care how beautiful a picture you can paint for me of your solution. If you have to impose on an individual's choices, if you have to go reach into their pocket against their will, take their
Mm-hmm.
property, etc., or tell them how to speak, how to think, what to do, the answer is no. Come up with a better solution to said problem, because in the mindset that I have and people over here have, if you can't solve the problem within the realm of individual liberty, it's not going to be solved, period. It's like a truism that you will create problems. You
Exactly.
cannot solve a problem by trampling someone's rights. So I can't make sure you have your full civil rights by imposing on someone else's civil rights. You have just negated all the goodness that was in that. Any intention you have, and even Martin Luther King would talk about that. We
Mm-hmm.
don't deal with hate. You don't get freedom by imposing on your enemy. That's not how it's done. And
Exactly.
so what the schools, I think, right now are manifests of the little snowball that went rolling downhill starting in the 1920s. And now it's this giant, monstrous, random boulder that's just rolling over and crushing all of Western civilization because it's fixing things that aren't broken. The
Exactly.
nuclear family broke because they tried to fix the problem of poverty. The problem of us not being all as educated as each other is now becoming mass illiteracy. We have the average, I think I was looking at yesterday, in the United States, we have something like 40% of our students graduating 12th grade read at grade level in the
Okay.
United States of America. That's inexcusable. How does that happen? That happens because people decided we can make this better. This thing that we have 99% literacy, but we need it to be 100%. So let's trample on some rights and push people off to school at gunpoint. And now
Mm-hmm.
we have 40%. They break everything they touch because they think as long as they can justify it with good intentions, it doesn't matter what individual gets hurt.
Exactly.
And if I can write you off as, well, you're rich, so it doesn't matter. Or, well, you're white, so it doesn't matter. Or, well, I can assign to you some aspect of blame or obligation to negate the fact that I just violated your rights. And we've seen that all year with COVID. It's like, oh, you just want a haircut. It's like, no, I'd actually like to make a living. Thanks very much. you know but
Yeah.
they take it to the most base instinct because that makes it easier for them to justify being a tyrant. They're petty
Exactly.
tyrants. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's true. And it's like, when you don't have problems and you create your own, it's like when there's, millions of children starving in other places of the world and you're worrying about what gender a toy is, that's when you have to think
Mr.
if
Potato Head.
yeah, I rebel and I still call him Mr. Potato Head, and
Or how
we
about
have
Dr. Seuss?
yeah,
Dr.
I heard
Seuss
about
is
that
now
as well. Even Shakespeare, they're coming for Shakespeare as well. And it reminds me of something you said. I can't remember fully, but it made me think of instead of them trying to replace and remove these people, why not? And if you feel you're not excluded, why not just add? Why do you need to replace or remove? And that's my
And
problem with all
Gothic
this.
said the same thing. She
And
said,
that, yeah,
you know, make new art. You're stifling creativity. If
exactly.
you
Why
have to go
remove?
back and
Mhm.
rewrite things, nothing new is getting created.
Exactly, and it's like it's going to come back around at you. You're opening up a can of worms. Even the thing with the nuclear family, I personally think it wasn't broken, but you know, many people think otherwise. I think it was working okay, but the problem is, you know, BLM, let's say they're saying, well, we're not trying to dismantle. We just want people to recognize other kinds of families. No, actually, you are trying to
It,
dismantle
it's
and
right
remove.
there in the curriculum.
It's so plain. One of their 13 guiding principles is that, like, you don't need to believe, or even things like religion. Why do they need to dismantle and remove? And there's an attack on Christianity as well. It's like, why do you need to remove this? Why not just, let's say, elevate yours? And it makes me, you know, I like to use simple analogies. And it's that whole thing of when women compete with each other and they always say, well, why are you trying to bring me down? Just come up to my
So
level. And it reminds me of that.
somebody just said it. It's because they don't care about any of the race. The race is just a stand-in for class. They're Marxists.
It
And
is.
that's really what's true of all of this. The critical race theorists, that what they figured out, and the same with BLM, is they figured out, you know, class doesn't really sell anymore, especially when, you know, we really don't have a rigid class structure. I mean, there are socioeconomic classes, but they're not rigid. You can
Mm-hmm.
cross the lines.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we sell Marxism into a society that doesn't have that? Well, we
Race.
replace it with race.
The
And
most
what's even,
obvious teacher
it's
that,
so
you know.
obvious. And what's
Mm-hmm.
even easier about that is you can't escape it. It's immutable. You can escape your socioeconomic class. You can't change your race. Like, I'll never be black, you'll never be white. So it's very easy for them to demonize me and elevate you. And the only purpose of that is not to actually elevate you, because they're really not going to. They're not
Mm-hmm.
interested
Mm-hmm.
in that. Is to divide us so
Yeah.
that we forget that we're actually, you know, one people, one human race, and we're all on the same team, so to speak. And there's a big enough world for all of us. There's enough wealth to go around for all of us. This fixed pie mentality that if one person is successful, it's because someone else is not successful, and vice versa, which is economically a lie. But because people are not educated in economics, they're not educated in even, you know, math properly, they believe it. It
It's
sounds
racist.
plausible. It
That's
sounds
racist.
plausible that there's like a
Mm-hmm.
bucket of money
Mm-hmm.
and but isn't it interesting how it's okay for Bill Gates to have a giant bucket of money, and it's okay
No
for
one
Jeff
calls him.
Bezos.
Yeah.
It's
I've
okay
never
for
seen
certain
anyone call
people to
him
be
a
mega
white
rich.
supremacist. Yeah. I've never
Yeah.
seen anyone call him a white supremacist. And the thing is, they do not, people need to understand, these people do not believe what they're saying. And it's like what
No.
I put on my Twitter, which was inspired by someone's podcast I listened to earlier. They say we hate capitalism, capitalism, but support black businesses. Make sure you support these black businesses. But what is business? What is enterprise? What is entrepreneurship? Socialism, the government, you know, making, no, it's the individual basis, it's the individual way of you making a living for yourself and your family. So they do not believe these things in themselves. And that's why
No,
I wonder,
they
why don't people really just see what they're saying and what they're doing, you know?
why don't
And
they notice that $90 billion, right? Was it about $90 billion that BLM raised? And
I
none
think
of it.
was it not millions? I think the billions was the damage that was caused, I
Oh,
heard.
was
I
it 90
think.
million
I
that they
think it was
had?
millions. I think it was
Okay. So
millions. Yeah.
regardless, 90 million is still a lot of money to have
It is a
zero
lot of money.
dollars to have
Hmm.
$0 making its way back to the communities that were destroyed by these riots. And in
Exactly.
most cases, these business owners will never reopen because what people said, well, they have insurance. No, they don't. Because even if the insurance paid for the damages there, that
Hmm.
doesn't really do anything, because those people had to turn around and use the money from insurance to clean up the waste. It's not like the city came along and cleaned that up. That was their responsibility to deal with all of that. And then they had employees to worry about, some of whom had contracts. And now you can't get insurance going forward. So you can't reopen without insurance. And now your insurance premium is way up here because you've had a riot in your neighborhood. So and do you see CNN reporting on this? No. Do you see the New York Times talking about the plight of the small business owner? No, because it destroys the narrative.
Exactly.
And meanwhile, you have pampered, prissy lawmakers who are on CNN crying and whining about January the 6th. And what kills me is I was opposed to it. I said, that's terrible what they did at the Capitol,
Yeah.
right? I don't believe in
Mm-hmm,
riots.
mm-hmm.
But the more they whined about it and the more they complained and acted like it was the 9/11 of, this century, all I could think was, it's not looking that bad anymore. Like now I'm starting to think it was like kind of minor, that's like
Uh-huh.
the more they complain, the less awful it seems to me. So, but the riots, I will never forget. And the people, the families, the stories that I read on alternate media
Mm-hmm.
were the only people who carried it.
Yeah, it's
So,
like, I never, this whole thing of they had insurance, it's just completely ignorant and just evil in itself because
and
I
somebody pointed out, who's gonna buy up all that real estate
exactly,
at
and
pennies on the dollar now?
yeah, it's not about insurance. Look, these are lives. These are lives. I run a small, like a online thing, not even a physical place. And if anything happened to that, I don't know what I would do. Now, imagine these are the places, that their fathers or their grandfathers, and most of these were black people I saw on my screens, other races, but it really hurt. Do you know why it hurt me when I saw it was a black person? It wasn't because I'm black. It's because BLM and all these, ugh, let me hold myself. All these people that were out there on the streets are there saying, we don't get nothing. We can't get loans because we are freaking black. We can't get loans for our businesses. They don't, and then you burn down the little you say you have. It just painted the perfect picture of BLM to me and many black people. They say they don't have much, even though they do. But let me agree with them. They don't have much, right? And this little that they have built, they use their own hands to destroy it. And what annoys me is that it doesn't come from them. It comes from them being baited by all these real racists using their skin color to literally lie to them. And that's what is hurtful. And that's why when people say, oh, well, why do you speak like you've never been through racism, which is another thing, because you speak a certain way, people automatically assume the life you had. It's funny because recently well, many people say it, especially because I speak to a lot of Americans. So it's like, well, you can't speak about American, racism because you've never been through American racism. And
Half
it's
of them
like,
haven't either.
that, well, this is my point. And it's like, I understand, but the problem is BLM have made it a worldwide thing for black people. I was fine. I was doing okay in my life, but BLM are the ones that said that actually you're not okay and your skin color is the reason why you're not okay. So I'm like, what? Sorry, I can't keep quiet about that. So this is what I see about these kind of people. It's not just black people, it's anyone with that kind of progressive mindset. They find points to exclude you from conversations. So you, it's because you're white. Me, it's because I'm black, but I'm not the right type of black, or I haven't experienced life in the normal type of black way. And they just keep saying stupid, ridiculous things because, like I've said, and like I always say, they don't know what they're talking about and they don't believe what they're talking about. That's why they can't take debates without, firing at you or your personality or whatever, because they have no other arguments.
Right.
There's nothing of value they can add to whatever they're saying. So they have to attack you as the person. So
Exactly.
it's just crazy.
And I mean, the part that I'm furious at them for the same reason that I feel like they're using people and it's exploitative what they're doing. And the other thing that scares me is that the backlash is going to come back on, it's not going to be selective. If there is a backlash, it will go back on anybody, whether you participated or you didn't. And that's where I start getting very nervous too, because I see it's happened even on my channel. Somebody has commented in the comments and I got a chill down my spine where they came to my channel and I was talking about woke stuff in the schools and they went off on, it's these liberal Jews and Jews invented this and Jews this and Jews
Yeah,
that. And
I've heard that. Mm-hmm.
and I deleted the comment because it gives me chills. I know I know where that's coming from, because in America in particular, the largest population, the largest, I would say that the primary political persuasion of most Jews is Democrat. They tend to be left wing. And then you have some individual Jewish people who have been part of certain movements. And so people say Jews, but that would be like saying all black people agree with, I don't know, Louis Farrakhan or something, or all black people agree with, Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton or something. And when you have prominent people who happen to be Jewish, suddenly it's like every Jewish person is responsible for this. It's that
Yeah.
same, that's why I told you, I object to this whole, the white guilt thing, because like if you take that on, if you validate the concept of collective guilt, that is so devastating and corrosive. That's where every genocide comes from. Every genocide in history has come from somebody saying collective guilt is okay. I don't care if you hate the people right now who are on the receiving end of the anger from the collective guilt being assigned. It
Mm-hmm.
could come back on you. It could
Mm-hmm.
come back on you. So if there is a backlash and a big majority of people decide they've had enough, and they start looking around and saying, well, no, it's all black people that are BLM, or it's all, or it's all Jewish people who are progressive left wingers or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to catch up a lot of people who don't agree with any of this. And so it's really important for people to stop and think about this philosophy. Like, where do
Mm-hmm.
you stand in your worldview? To try it as
Mm-hmm.
hard as you can to leave your personal experience out of it, to leave any animosities you have out of it, and think of it, if it were flipped 180 degrees back to you, how would you feel? Because
Exactly.
it could be. You can't validate this idea. You can't, not in a Western society. This is something that has its place in tribal cultures, and I thought we were more enlightened than that. What does this say? Why BLM? Yeah, progressive's been hijacked, liberal's been hijacked. They've all been hijacked. Even conservative doesn't mean what it's supposed to mean anymore.
There's just too many labels, in my opinion.
Yeah.
There's just too many labels, and it's so unfortunate for people who want to live life label free. And personally, I don't think, it's going to be an attack on race, maybe like you say. I just think, sorry, not the point I want to make. You mentioned that they want to divide us, and I think it's much more than that, because actually divided, they might not benefit as much. They're just trying to confuse us. We're all confused. We black people don't even know what's what. Are we oppressed? Are we not? Do we hate white people? Do we not hate white people? White people are thinking, how should I be? Oh my gosh, I'm racist. I didn't know. This Asian people are like, I'm white now. Didn't know, but okay. There's so, trans
Internalized racism.
yeah,
We've been
transgender people. There's just so many. Actually, that's the point I want to make. There's a eruption of all the labels now, and it's like it started in 2020. All the labels just came out and were just over magnified, and it's just to create confusion. So for me to look at you and think, even just these conversations have increased by the masses. Like, people who were not talking about racial things, identity, politics, for goodness sake. People are not talking about politics. Please tell me a single human being that is not talking about politics today. Because what they've done is that they've infiltrated it in everything. In the
You
movies,
can't
in the
order a
gaming.
sandwich without having a
You
political
can't.
opinion about where the
You
sandwich
can't.
came from. I mean,
You
it's
can't.
crazy.
So, and once they bring confusion, then they bring the solutions to our confusion. That's the whole aim. That's the whole aim of the government. They bring the problems, they cause the confusion so that you can look to them for clarity. And now we're looking to governments more for clarity, for policies, for trainings, for resources, because everybody is just so confused. And it's sad. It's really sad.
Well, what I keep thinking is that if there's any hope, it is in the fact that this, these new media that we have at our disposal allow this conversation to happen in the first place. It would not previously have been possible.
Mm-hmm.
In order for them to isolate us truly, they would have to go so far over into tyranny that then it would be obvious there's no hope, right? But we
Mm-hmm.
haven't gotten to that point yet. And so my feeling is that if we can make sure enough people, and it doesn't have to be the majority by any stretch, if we can just make sure enough people are taking this seriously and not waiting until they announce on a loudspeaker, leave your home and get in the cattle car. Tyranny
Mm-hmm.
doesn't
Mm-hmm.
arrive by loudspeaker. It creeps in and creeps in until you wake up one day and then they are at your door.
It's like on six. I didn't even realize. Thank you. Someone said they're enjoying the live.
Oh, well,
That's so
good.
great.
Thanks
Thank
for having
you.
me on. And I think before you were asking me something like, one piece of advice or
Yeah,
something.
I mean, just from a perspective of a parent and also perspective of a teacher who's in schools as well, like in terms of just, this new religion of wokeism that's, going around, which will be the new official religion soon, whether it's overtly or not, it is here to stay. And if you probably the most hostile religion, if people think religions are hostile anyway, because you literally are publicly humiliated and shamed and cancelled, shunned if you don't agree to these invisible rules, which they are invisible rules that, they set up. So, yeah.
I think, most people won't like the advice I'm going to give, but it is that you really need to start setting your priorities straight. And I don't mean to sound judgmental, but you need to get your priorities out there and decide, if you already are a parent, how important are the things to you that you say preclude you from educating your own child. Now, for the single parent who has to work, I have no choice, I have to work, my heart goes out to you, but I would tell even that person, you might need to build community, you might need to find a co-op, you might need to share in childcare situations, but even you can do it. People are doing it. And I say that because I know that a lot of families are like, oh, but we have two incomes. Well, dig deep. Do you need the same size home? Do you need to go on those vacations? And we're not going anywhere anyway, right? But do you really need these things? And how will you feel, really project yourself forward into time? How will you feel in a number of years if your child comes home from school and starts lecturing you on what a bad person you are? Or if your child becomes one of these raging activists who you don't know anymore, and it's not really your child anyway, because the school has now taken them over and turned them into somebody that you hardly know. So I guess I would say to people is really, it's hard. Life is hard. You kind of have to choose your hard. And I don't mean to be melodramatic, but we are dealing with a mind virus here in this ideology. And if you can shield your children from that until they are fully literate, until they learn how to do math and they're numerate and they can question these calculations that they're being given, and they can look at real statistics, and they can find a way, a skill, develop a passion, which they won't get in school. They won't get a passion. They won't get a skill. If you can help them do that, they will be useful. They will be able to survive. And that it's sort of like an insurance policy. What you're doing with whatever you're giving up is you are buying an insurance policy on your child's future happiness and possibly
Yes.
life.
Mm-hmm.
And I again, I hate to sound hyperbolic, but I think we really need to start thinking in those terms, that it's not 10 years ago of, well, but I already paid for my taxes, and I'll just teach them the right values at home, and then I'll send them to school. You cannot protect them from this. This is way bigger than whatever you're going to try to teach them at home. If you teach them to be a good Christian, as an example, they will go to school and be told that that is an oppressive faith and they need to give it up. They will have other kids picking on them and bullying them because of it. So do you want, how strong do you want to ask your 5-year-old, your 6-year-old, your 7-year-old to be? Because you need to keep doing whatever it is that you're doing that you say you must do. So I would say, seriously consider that and really open up your mind and your heart and ask yourself, is this really a need, or do I want? And could I satisfy the needs some other way that supports my child having a more customized home-based education?
and then opt out. That's my advice. I really can't, I'd be lying to say otherwise. I really would. My brother told me, he said, well, we're just going to try to, shield him with lessons from home. And I said, you're asking a lot of a child. You're asking for a child. My children had good lessons, obviously, right? I had to
Hmm.
put them in a public school when I got divorced, and they were all bullied. They were all bullied, and not just for looks or this or that. They were bullied for ideas. They were bullied to a point where it became an untenable situation. So you have to consider the full picture. And Gabrielle Clark has a really good window into that because her son was bullied, and that's why she had to sue.
Hmm.
So
Nice.
it's serious, but I know people don't want to hear it. It's not great
But
news,
that's
but
the, it's not hyperbolic. These things are, it's what's happening, and it's like, it's so powerful what you said. That's my, I guess that's the way I navigate through my life. Life is not personal in terms of it's happening to me because it's me, in terms of hardships and battles and things like that. Like, especially for many Black people who feel that way and who come out with things like the world, the entire world filled with 7 billion people is anti-Black. When they have mentalities like that and they think that, everything is so personal to them, and they have to really see, what is causing that,
mhm.
what is making them feel that that's how they're meant to be in life, if it's from the family. I think it's just being courageous to divorce from that group set mentality. I know you're talking about school, and the best ways to shield yourself from that, and I'm just giving sort of personal to Black people, to whoever feels like, they're being told that they're a certain way, and they've made it part of not just their narrative but part of their identity, because that's deeper. No, your narrative is just, what you think, how you believe life is, but when you make that part of who you are, then that's more difficult for you to actually get away from. And I think, you said a lot of things in different aspects about mental health and things like that. And the aim of all of this, no matter what angle you look at it, is the deterioration of our minds. We're losing our minds. Either it's people being so overwhelmed they don't know what to think, or it's people who are being told what to think. We're losing our minds. And everyone is different. For children, the parents need to be more, more, how can I say, more deliberate about their child's upbringing and their child's learning. I think there's a loss of that. Because what
Yeah,
you've said, I actually debated someone about this, because they were saying, well, I can't keep track of what my child is doing. Literally, that's what they said. And I said, that's your new reason to live. That's your new purpose in life, to see and understand and know what your child is doing. And please don't get me wrong. I know, like you mentioned, socioeconomics. I know different people in different, situations. I can understand that. But come on, it's a basic thing of understanding how your child is developing in life.
100%.
I don't think it's necessary. Well, I know you would disagree, but I don't necessarily think it's what your child is receiving. I think it's how they're interpreting what they receive.
No, I
Um,
agree with that. I agree with that. Yeah,
yeah,
but they know the people who are delivering these manipulative messages are very skillful. They know the audience. They know the audience they're speaking to, and they're using it. They're capitalizing. It's just like any cult leader. It would be no different from the what Jim Jones did. I don't know if you know who Jim Jones is. He was a cult leader back in the
right,
70s. But when you specifically target people who have an insecurity, whether it's a literal insecurity financially or a psychological insecurity, it's a neuro linguistic programming. I mean, you know exactly the messages you need to give. You give a future fake, you give an explanation and a scapegoat. It's so formulaic. It's actually quite easy to do. It's terrifying how easy it is to do. So
yeah. And just going back to the Black culture and them being told that they're so oppressed and then they're not able to make it. I love the analogy you use, that you're taking in some cases, truth, because it is true that there are some gaps, in society that exclude, certain groups. But I will never understand until today why that's all I say to them then. And I always talk back, because I used to work in charity, and I used to work like mentoring and helping a lot of women who were in abusive relationships, who were abused as children and things like that. And it was like, they would always say, well, this is the reason I can never make it in life. But I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but with common sense, I wouldn't then reinforce that and say, yeah, actually, the reason that you're going to be stuck until the day you die is because of your abuser, and they need to do certain things for you to be able to be free. But we don't do that, do we? We say, actually, it is horrible. We don't tell them to forget that. We never tell them to forget, but we say that they need to disassociate from the painful memories or the painful emotions that they've attached to those memories. But we say that, their lives are ultimately in their hands, and they have the power, to live the lives that they want to live.
Right, but they're going after all the modalities of therapy that would teach that. If you ever went to therapy, they are going after the curriculum at every level. There's somebody who has been commenting about how they're going after STEM. So they're going after the things that are typically objective, where we can still maintain society, and then they're going after the law. I mean, and these are the pillars that hold up Western civilization. So we have to push back. We have to be guardians of the truth. I'm building a paper library. I'm literally like stockpiling books of things because I don't want to lose knowledge. They can ban books. They can stop printing books all day long. But if we each maintain a paper library, they can't take that. Also, we need to educate our children. If you have a child or know a child, whether they're in school or out, you need to make sure they understand how things work. Get them a book or 2 books on the mechanics of life, okay? So whatever it is, they need to understand that, for example, when Hugo Chavez took over the oil company and took over all these things, there was one little tiny problem. They don't know how to run an oil company. They didn't know how to build the bridges. They didn't know how to do, and if you can't just take knowledge, you can't just take power and say, I now own all the things that make the world work, the wealthy world work. No, you can't. That comes out of the brains of people, and you can't appropriate that. You can't do it. So, they can take up all the spots at MIT with, racial quotas and say, well, we did away with our entrance exams and we made it more equitable. But if they can't do the job, they can't do the job. And do you want to cross the bridge that was built by the engineer who went to MIT because they were a racial quota? No. I mean, it's really kind of scary. So if we start making people aware of like how things get built and how things work, you will start to realize very quickly those take skills. It's not just occupying a job. It's not just like, oh, look, I get this paycheck, therefore I know how to do this thing. Exactly. I think we've seen that in the schools. People get paychecks for being teachers. They're not doing a very good job, are they?
Teachers.
Right. So anyway, but I don't want to keep you anymore because I feel like you've got family that wants you. So.
Family. No, yeah. It's always a pleasure talking to you because you're literally one of the smartest people I know, and the knowledge just oozes from you. And it's like you have like different, your teacher and you're a mom as well, and you're an intellectual woman, it's like a rarity. One day, right? It's going to be
I try to be a rational person. That probably the thing that I say that surprises the most people is when they start putting out articles like maybe it might have been better if women didn't get the vote, and there's me coming and going, there's some merit to that argument. And they're like, how can you say that? And I'm like, well, it's for whatever reason, and I'm not saying the vote did it, but for whatever reason we have over feminized our society. And as I said, I'm happy to be a woman, and there's many fine qualities to women, and I'm very proud of my femininity, but you can't run a society on one quality or one set of qualities alone. There isn't one that's better and one that's worse. It is an absolutely false understanding of gender differences, sex differences, etc., and even cultural norms to say that this is better, that's better. And I think we went so far off the cliff in that direction, and we are paying the price. And I say that as a woman, and I say that as a mother of 3 daughters. I really believe that.
And unfortunately, I don't mean to be pessimistic or dark, but I think our children, whoever doesn't have yet, I don't have yet, if we are not deliberate, if we are not mindful, they will pay. And it's going to be a scary place that they're going to grow up in. And, you know, I think people should stop saying this, oh, I don't mean to be dark, but, you know, it's the truth. It's going to happen at large in society. We can't stop that. But like you said, in our own local little ways, you know, maybe, you know, that's a conservative idea, right? You know, it's not the social kind of world we're trying to impact. We
People
believe
survived the Dark Ages, they survived the plague, they
you
survived the
know,
Depression, they survived the
exactly.
Nazis. I mean, somebody will survive. So it may or may not be me, it may or may not be you, but somebody will. And so we have to just appoint ourselves individually in our own families and in our own communities that we're going to be guardians of civilization in any small way we can. Develop a skill, teach your children a skill, make them useful. Don't let them be victims, because we've all, I mean, I don't know if you watch The Walking Dead, but I watch it. And the takeaway I have from that show is, if nothing else, I don't pay attention to the zombies, but the
Hmm.
takeaway is the people who survive are the people who are useful and can make themselves useful to themselves and to their community. So
Exactly.
we need to go back to that.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much for having me
I,
on.
my pleasure.